This is recording 2 of the book The Resurrection of People and Eternal Life From Now On Is Our Reality by Grigori Grabovoi. Read by Ludmila. August 2015. Introduction continued. In the books of this series, we examine how the past, the present, and the future can be changed based on the knowledge of the fundamental laws of the organization of the world and in accordance with the objective of actualization of eternal life. In reality, this is only from the perspective of ordinary waking consciousness, which is, I will repeat, consciousness that uses a three-dimensional space and time model. Only from the viewpoint of such consciousness, the past lives were in the past, or past events of this life were in the past. The present exists in the present, and the future will exist in the future. In actual fact, or more accurately, for someone who has attained a higher state of consciousness, all of these, the past, the present, and the future, exist simultaneously. Or, to put it another way, they are in a static state. Let's recall, quote, "And he swore that there should be time no longer," unquote. This is exactly why it is possible to transition a person from the past into the present. That is, someone who has gone can be brought back into our world again. Furthermore, the returned does not regard his return as something out of the common, and even more so as something improbable. For him all this is a matter of course. He perceives this transition, just as someone in his daily life perceives the transition to a normal condition of health after the recovery from the cold or the flu. You can hear it for yourself if you talk to one of those who have come back. At present, their numbers are growing every day. Several words must be said about the difference between two approaches to comprehending the world. One of them is the approach of a scientist. The other is the approach of someone who exercises a harmonious spiritual control of reality, which can be characterized as inner seeing. The first approach is well known. Based on their observations and experiments, scientists try to see what isolated phenomena, which at first sometimes appear unrelated, have in common, what links them together. And if successful, they establish a law which embraces different phenomena in a single formula. We all know from school about Newton's laws, using which the motion of a soccer ball and that of an aircraft, as well as planetary motion in the solar system, can be calculated. In their work, scientists use devices created in laboratories and plants. An improvement of the devices enables them to get new information. The second approach to comprehending, cognizing the world is completely different. Here in his work, instead of using devices made either in laboratories or plants, that is, devices artificially created, a person utilizes a God-given device, his, her own organism. It is this device that does the work. And I can say right away that all the books of this series are based on this second approach. And as we will see further, this particular approach should be the first and the main one. But we can already say that the need to overcome the existing threat of global destruction and establish a spiritual control over the technological expansion proves it. For it is clear that continued accumulative advancement of technical systems can become dangerous unless they are based on control through human consciousness, since it is consciousness that develops harmoniously along with the development of the entire world. Scientists who work at the forefront of science fully realize that in order to explain the phenomena of this world, it is necessary to create theories utilizing multidimensional spaces, that is, spaces of more number of dimensions than 3, And not only do scientists realize that, they do so. However, if they are not capable of perceiving such spaces, their potential will be significantly limited from the start. That is why, here too, just as everywhere else, the objective is to somehow overcome the limitations of our present perception. But the question is how it can be done. This question concerns every person, regardless of his/her occupation. This is one of the key questions. As I said earlier, changing the state of consciousness and ascending to ever higher states of consciousness is an overriding priority for man. What exactly man needs to do for his evolution, and first of all for the evolution of his consciousness, is a separate broad subject, and it will find its place in this series of books. But in order that you, without delay, could begin changing your system and start harmonizing its functioning with the pulse of the universe, there are exercises for every day of the month provided at the end of the book, in the appendix. They may take only several minutes a day to do, but their effect on you will be tangible, because for every particular day of the month they suggest practice most suitable for that very day. And thereby the exercises ensure maximum efficacy while requiring minimum effort and time. The actuality of the issue of changing the state of our consciousness presents itself at every turn of life. Again and again life brings us back to this issue. Imagine you are in a park, and suppose you see a blossoming rose. You see the wondrous colors of its tender petals, feel its delicate aroma, and maybe a water droplet on its petal is sparkling in the sun after the rain. You are contemplating this supernal loveliness, and this beauty and fragrance fascinate you. You feel the presence of a different kind of life beside you. You would like to understand it, but how can it be done? You feel that the answer is somewhere near. You feel it with all your being, but at the same time it seems as if something were lacking. The flower is here, it is before you, but it seems as if an invisible barrier separated you from it. The answer is coming to you, you feel it, but as if in another language. You feel as though you were unable to penetrate through something. And the question remains, how could one find out what a rose is? Let's turn to science. Science, among other things, can perform a chemical analysis of a flower, can determine the percentage of certain chemical elements in it, can study the processes occurring in the flower tissues, but the knowledge of all these percentage ratios and types of processes won't help us much to find out, understand, feel what a lovely, fragrant flower is. And therefore the question arises again, how can it be done? How can we find out what a rose is? And is it at all possible? It turns out that it is, but there is only one way to do it, and it is as follows. In order to find out what a rose is, one has to become a rose. One has to become one with it, even for just a moment. And this is possible, but only, of course, in a higher state of consciousness. And this is the way of comprehending the world, which is the main one, should be the main one. Note, in order to acquire knowledge this way, there is no need to cut a flower, no need to destroy it. This is a fundamentally different technology of gaining knowledge. This is gaining knowledge without destruction. Let's make a short digression. We have just talked about the fact that a higher state of consciousness opens the door to a totally different perception of the world. It should, however, be borne in mind that the state in which we generally are does not always remain the same. A simple self-observation reveals it very quickly. Recall your perception of some repeated event. Try to remember how you felt. You will recall that your perception was not always the same. Your impressions varied. We have all experienced that. Sometimes The perception is foggy, but sometimes the fog seems to clear away, and the perception becomes clearer, sharper. We notice that this time, this day, we suddenly care much more about a given event or a given person. All this, to a large extent, is due to the fact that we are hardly ever in one and the same state of consciousness. It constantly fluctuates within certain limits, commensurate with the level of our development at the moment. And when at times we experience particular states of elation, a feeling of living a full life, of being filled with joy and happiness, all these are the signs of a higher state of consciousness compared to our ordinary state. And these are often the moments that stay in our memory, sometimes for life. Of course, a sudden shift from our ordinary state to a fairly high state of consciousness can happen too, in which case a person will experience something similar to illumination, bliss, overwhelming joy of being. However, it is impossible to describe this state with words. One has to experience it. Through proper spiritual aspiration, proper understanding, and good regular practice, it is possible to attain the level when these higher states of consciousness will be always with you. The matters under discussion can be approached from a somewhat different perspective. Suppose that in the storeroom or in the attic of your summer house you stumble upon the magnifying glass you once put there. It stayed there for a long time and got covered with a thick layer of dust. You come into the yard and suddenly notice an ant creeping along a path. You would like to have a better look at it. You bend down, but no use. The ant is too small. Just then you remember of the magnifying glass you have stumbled upon and are holding in your hand. You bring it closer to the ant and begin to vaguely distinguish some particulars, but still there is no notable improvement. We then can take a scientific approach to the matter. We can start moving the glass closer towards and then away from the ant, analyzing the changes taking place. We can observe the ant from different angles by changing our position. We can develop more complex procedures and include statistical data processing. In short, we can develop a strong research program. But there is another way to do it. We can wipe the glass with a clean cloth, and then, without any algorithms and statistical data processing, we can see the ant clearly right away. We were able to quickly and easily achieve the desired result because we did the main thing. We improved the device used for our observations. So, in order to successfully advance on the path of true understanding of the world, we need first of all to improve our perception. We need to change our body state. For instance, we need to perfect the brain function, although even the change in one cell can change the state of the entire body. And then it brings up a cardinal question: how to produce such change? How could it be done? There are many ways to attain this objective, but one of the easiest and at the same time the most effective ones is meditation. As a result of a regular meditation practice, a fundamental change in the brain function takes place. Gradually, more and more parts of the brain begin to work in concert. This has been supported by scientific studies using encephalograms. By using electroencephalograms, the effect of meditation on brain wave patterns in different parts of the brain was studied. The research has shown that as one becomes more proficient in meditation, larger and larger areas of his/her brain begin to function in a concerted manner. And when a person has fully mastered meditation, his/her entire brain starts working concertedly. In terms of physics, we may say that the person's brain now works coherently. Everybody knows what a revolution the creation of the laser has made in science and technology. The research in this field has been honored with the Nobel Prize in Physics. The essence of this work is that for the first time it was possible to successfully produce coherent radiation and determine the principles of its generation. It is the coherence of laser light that explains all its unique, remarkable properties. Similarly, when as a result of a certain practice, a man's brain starts working in a coherent mode, it gets a qualitatively different instrument at his disposal. And as with a laser, it is the coherent operation of the brain that gives rise to the emergence of fundamentally new abilities and potential in man. It is important to note the following. The purpose of those experiments was to determine how meditation affects brain function, and it is for that reason we discussed it earlier. But in actual fact, the changes produced by meditation involve not only brain function, but also the functioning of the entire body, of its each and every cell. So, making an analogy with a laser, and taking into consideration that a laser is compared to a living organism, one can understand that although the difference between the properties of laser radiation and ordinary light sources is enormous, the difference in the way the body functions before and after mastering meditation is still immeasurably greater. As a matter of fact, the difference is so great that a person virtually moves to another level of existence. For it should be borne in mind that a human organism is a system with infinite capacities for self-improvement, and it is hard even to imagine all potentialities of this system. And one further comment. When I say that one of the methods of changing the state of the body is meditation, it should be kept in mind that meditation can be very diverse. There are many kinds of meditation. A prayer, for instance, is in fact a form of meditation. At the same time, of course, a prayer, like any true meditation, must be spiritual. In the Christian tradition, there is, among other prayers, a so-called prayer of a single thought, the Jesus prayer, the prayer of a high spiritual level, during which consciousness stays in the region of the heart, and which is very effective for entering higher states of consciousness. Fast transitions into higher states of consciousness can be accomplished through practicing different concentrations. When performing concentrations, meditation can be an integral part of the process. In order to assess the state of a patient's internal organs, health professionals use medical equipment and thus send a patient for an X-ray, for example, or diagnostic ultrasound. But a person with developed inner seeing does otherwise. He uses his own organism as a device. He shifts it into the proper operation mode and can see a patient's internal organs by means of clairvoyance. Not only is it possible to see internal organs by means of clairvoyance, but also learn what they are for, as well as how to restore them. What is more, through the use of clairvoyance, the answer to a question is obtained instantaneously. Here we do not have to, as in scientific approach, conduct experiments, accumulate data, analyze it, search for regularities, etc. All this work, in fact, is done in order to obtain an answer. But in actual fact, the answer already exists somewhere. We only have to take it. Indeed, suppose, for example, we are interested in an organ such as the appendix and would like to know what purpose it serves. It is clear that to nature its purpose is known. So the answer already exists. We only need to stretch out our hand and take it, and it can be done using clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is a universal way of accessing information. What could such method of obtaining information be compared with? In fact, we have something similar in our life today. It is a global net, Internet. This net allows us to access any information within the net from any part of the world. So, it turns out that there is something like a cosmic net, a universal net, where there is data about everything. A man in this case can be compared to an operator. Then clairvoyance is a way for an operator to enter the cosmic net with an inquiry, and the speed of response there is so great that the answer is given instantaneously. I will note that rather than the cosmic net, it is in fact better to refer to it as a universal information field. This raises an interesting question. How are discoveries made? The discoveries, sometimes outstanding, are made in various areas of life. Especially it applies to science. But of course, in other fields they are made too. For example, a certain change in a planned technological process or in society. This is indeed one of the phenomena of our life. Though in terms of making discoveries, science perhaps is the most telling example. Well, the question that arises is, what can be said from the given point of view about the discoveries made by people who do not have clairvoyance? When a person has a brilliant idea and makes a discovery, this idea, this answer to his/her search, comes of course from the same database, from the cosmic net database. And in a sense, it is not fortuitous that this answer comes to him or her. Not fortuitous in the sense that it is often obtained as a result of long years of search and hard work. But it is impossible to tell when the answer will come, and if it will come at all. So it should be admitted that this breakthrough to the database is unfortunately, nonetheless, accidental, for it is not controlled, it is not controllable. We can make the following comparison. Suppose there are two people who are in need of water. One of them puts his palms together, outstretches his arms, waiting for the rain to come, so that he can get some water. The other knows about the existence of a water supply system. More importantly, he knows how to use it. So when he needs water, he just comes up to a tap and turns it on, and he fills either a glass or a bucket or an entire tank with water as needed. So one has to know and understand the standard procedure of accessing information. The fact is that there are a great many questions, but too few accidental breakthroughs to the answers. If we take, for instance, the foregoing question regarding the function of the appendix, up to now there has been no such breakthrough yet, such as in countless other cases. The foregoing requires one important comment. By way of illustration, I have compared the use of clairvoyance with entry into the cosmic net, where one can find the answer to any question. This comparison is more a reflection of an external side of the phenomenon. It does not reflect its intrinsic profundity, its multivariance, and thus certain clarifications are needed. Namely, one can, of course, as was said, in order to access information, enter the universal cosmic net with an inquiry. But it is possible to do otherwise. The information can be taken outright from where the transmitter supplying this information is. In fact, and this is very important, the information already exists in the status of a person asking a question. That is, as direct knowledge, when this information, yet undeciphered, that is, having not yet been brought to a person's conscious awareness, already determines his/her behavior. In order for a person to be able to instantaneously recognize and use it, to consciously determine his/her behavior, a high level of consciousness development is required. And this is the very objective I spoke of. Earlier I mentioned the problem of the appendix. By way of example, let's look into the matter a little deeper. Contemporary science, I repeat, does not yet really know what the appendix is and what role it plays. But by means of clairvoyance, it is possible to learn everything about the appendix. It turns out it is an important organ. It has several functions. One of them is as follows. The appendix projects the left hemisphere of the brain on the right hemisphere through the immune system of the body. And one of the functions of the appendix is to support the balance of these systems. If the appendix has been removed, the reserve recovery function of the immune system weakens. In this case, the immune system for reproduction now has to be projected within either the left or the right hemisphere, which overstresses the brain, leads to elevation of intracranial pressure, as well as to other undesirable consequences. Thereby, the appendix appears in a completely new light. In fact, we discover it for the first time. Amazing things can be told about other organs as well. Just take the pituitary alone. End of recording 2.